Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing. Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Loud and
Yes,
clear.
we
Good
can.
afternoon.
Afternoon, wonderful. I saw Miguel had on the email that we're starting promptly at 12:30. Uh, Hopefully we'll be able to maintain that promptly at 12:30. I promised myself the same thing, that it'll be exactly 12:30 every week, but it'll be right around that area. How's everybody?
Good afternoon.
Great,
Well,
thank you.
good afternoon, good afternoon. Unfortunately, nobody has sent me a class register yet. I just saw some names popping up through the email. So I have some of the names. I don't have all the names, but I'll see if I can rectify that first of all in the next few minutes so that I can see exactly who is in this class. So let me get that bit of housekeeping out of the way first, and then I'll get into all of the other blah, blah, blah. All right. I'll call the names I have. Kendra Kelly cannot hear. I wonder, can everybody else hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess Kendra must be having.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Kendra must be having microphone. Yeah, just check your mic stuff, Kendra. Maybe it's the computer mic, the Zoom mic, the anybody. What else can it be? If she cannot hear. We don't know either. Okay. So I see Kendra came up in any event. So she's here. I have her on the list. I also have Alison Ferguson. Are you there, Alison?
I'm here.
Okay, Alison. Welcome aboard. Just making sure I have all the names eventually. Alison Ferguson. Okay, great. Jeffries McKinney.
I am here.
Okay, Jeffries McKinney. Okay, Jeffries. Excellent. Shatoya King. Okay, Shatoya is not here at the moment. Oh, there she is. King here. What's going on with the mics today? Okay, Shatoya is here.
I'm present.
Oh, there you are, Shatoya. Excellent. Annalisa.
Good morning, everyone. I can hear now.
Yeah, excellent. What did you do, Kendra?
I attached my AirPods, my wireless AirPods, but I cannot hear without them.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Wonderful. Okay. Annalisa.
I'm here, thank you.
Annalisa, excellent. Uh-oh, something rolled. Lucia?
I'm here.
Okay, Lucia, did I pronounce that correctly?
It's close enough, Lucia.
Oh, Lucia as like Lucia as an Italiano?
I guess.
Okay, Lucia. That's how the Italians would say it, Lucia.
Right.
Here we go. Okay, Lucia. I hope I can remember that little Italian piece in the middle there. Joyanne Ferguson. Joy Ann Ferguson. Okay, Miss Joyanne will join us along the way. Ara Kalma.
I'm here.
Okay.
Renee.
Renee. Okay, Renee. Let me just put that here. Ari and Renee Kalma. Excellent. Great. That's all the names I was able to pull off. Whose name I didn't call?
Janicia Miller.
Okay, let me start with that. Janicia, Janishia, Janishia. Okay, thank you, Janicia.
Tri-Cita Small.
Triceta, okay, Triceta, Tricetta, small, okay.
Gia Ferguson.
Yeah, yes, JIA, Ferguson. Excellent. Anybody else whose name I didn't call? Lovely. Okay. So the only person who has not responded yet is Joanne Ferguson. I guess she'll join us eventually. Okay, lovely.
You didn't say Alexandria Feaster.
Alexandria Feast. Okay.
Feaster, not feast.
Oh,
Feaster.
Ester.
Correct.
Okay. Alexandria Feaster. How about that? Okay. Thank you very much, Alexandria. Any other names I didn't call? Okay, lovely. Well, welcome aboard, everybody. I shall find out very shortly why you guys decided to join up for this corporate governance class, but I can tell you somewhere along the way in the next 10 weeks, we'll be talking about some very specific corporate governance issues and requirements. I'm not sure where you are in the world of corporate governance, but we all know, hopefully by now, that everybody in the firm anywhere is responsible for some issues area of corporate governance. I believe most of us might probably know that the board of directors has always been given this primary responsibility. However, they are only the guys and girls who lead it. We're all responsible to some extent for making sure it works. Because those of us who work in the firm, if we do not adhere to the rules and regulations, the board will not be successful, shareholders will not be happy, regulators are going to be on your tail like white on rice, and then it gets very stinky eventually, as I'm sure many of you are already aware of. So we're going to be talking about those responsibilities primarily from a regulatory perspective and to some extent from a financial perspective as well, since a lot of governance violations involve financial statements, activities on the stock exchange that are illegal, and certainly risk management, strategic issues, and so on. So a lot of little interesting bits and pieces are scheduled to come up just to make sure that at least you are aware in principle of what the basic requirements are for proper governance, so that when you get out there, you take the information you already know, plus anything you might pick up along the way over the next 10 weeks. And hopefully that will make you a better employee, a better manager, a better board member. And if you're a shareholder, an informed shareholder. How about that? Just remember, if any of you in this class have shares in any company in the Bahamas, for example, you are a shareholder, even if you own one share. And so therefore, as a shareholder, you have a part ownership in that company, which means that you are interested in what your board is doing or should be. And certainly you should be interested in whether they're conforming to the proper governance requirements. And if they're not, next shareholder meeting, you take some of the notes from this class and you go and ask questions. Like, are you doing this and are you doing that? And they're like, who are you? So I have one share, which means I have a voice in this company and I'd like to know if your governance is in order. Okay. So the point I'm making is whatever information you get will and should be useful from some perspective now and forever in one form or another. That's kind of what governance is like. It's like the ABCs of learning to read and write. It's the ABCs of running entities of any kind and running them properly. so that they do not become subject to all the malfeasance that you've seen and you do see every single day. All right, so I just thought I'd throw down the gauntlet early so that you can see what you're in for. My corporate governance class is not a lecturer talk down session only. My classes, I try to encourage students to participate wherever possible. So I'm going to be, chit-chatting for a bit, but I'm expecting you to raise questions, bring us examples. If you have any curiosities from the world of work or the world of the world, please bring them to this class and raise them anytime you wish so that you can get feedback on it. You don't have to call any names if you don't want to about particular situation, institutions, etc. But you can get feedback on it, and certainly any questions you ask in this forum will not only be a benefit to you, but certainly to your colleagues in this class as well. Okay? So please, you don't need to make an appointment to raise a question in my class. You don't need to raise your hand on Zoom. You can just blurt things out. Excuse me, I have a question. And that's perfectly fine with me. Okay? For sure. All right. Before I go any further, and again, you can interrupt me at any time. I don't get upset by interruptions. I love interruptions for any reason, even if it's a simple matter or even what you think is an unrelated matter. Interrupt me, because every interruption is important. Okay? Before I go any further, let me just give you my contact information. So over the next 10 weeks, you guys will know how to find me. First and foremost, for those of you who might still not know, my name is Samuel Wilkinson. I will be your lecturer for the next couple of weeks in corporate governance and financial literacy. My cell number, please take it down, is 565-9551. If you have any concerns along the way and you need to send a text or make a call, please do that. My email address, in the event you need to send me an email, I'm checking it all the time, so feel free, is S as in Samuel, J as in Jack, H as in Henry, Wilkinson, WILKINSON at hotmail.com. Okay. Did everybody get that?
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Indeed, sounds like one of my words already. Way to go.
Can you repeat the email once more, please?
The email again is SJH Wilkinson, WILKINSON at hotmail.com.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Now, the other thing that I would like for you guys to do when the class is over, there we go. When the class is over, please send me a confirmation email to my email so that I am sure that I have everybody's exact email address. Because sometimes I have stuff to send to you, and occasionally the email listing does not always have the correct email. Somebody makes a slip somewhere that leaves out a letter, puts in the wrong letter, and so one or two students may not get the information. So please send me a confirmation email after we're done. Say yeah, and then I'll say got it, and then I'll be certain that I have everybody's email address. Okay. All right. So we got that little bit of housekeeping out of the way. Now, in terms of my background, just so that you know, I didn't run out the bush to teach you this course. In my old life, I started off as a retail banker at Citibank a million years ago. And then I went in to be a loan manager with Scotiabank a million years ago. And then after that, I started another life as a financial controller a million years ago. Because while I was doing loans at Scotiabank, I was also studying accountancy, and I wanted to get some real life practice. So I ended up leaving Scotiabank and going into the world of finance and accounting, where I worked as a financial controller for a bank and a hotel and a union and all that crazy stuff. And then that was the first part of my former life. And then my other former life, I spent another 20 years, believe it or not, in private banking, worked for all kinds of crazy banking cultures, from the Brazilians to the Filipinos, to the Canadians, to the French Canadians, to the Swiss. So I've seen all kinds of crazy things. And during that time, I had the pleasure of being compliance managers, compliance, this and that in those institutions, along with holding second officer positions and all that crazy stuff. So I've seen quite a few interesting things, which is why I'm suggesting if you have any questions related or unrelated that you'd like to get off your chest, feel free to raise them. I am happy to respond to them, okay, by all means, as best as I can. And any answer I cannot tell you, I will tell you where to look, or I'll get it for you and get it back to you, for sure. So that's a little background about me. I've been teaching at BIS forever. I also teach accounting at BIS. I teach compliance at BIS. I teach taxation, whatever. A lot of stuff that they need done. So I've been around doing this crazy stuff one way or the other for quite a while. And so I welcome you guys who are in the world of work. I am not officially retired yet, but as you can see, I've been around a long time doing one thing or the other thing or the other thing. So welcome to you youngsters who are out there making this thing work. And I am at your disposal for sure. Okay, any questions so far? No questions? Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason why is any questions, I just want to hear your voice, keep it interactive so that you can always be kicking with something. All right. So don't be bashful. I know it's the first day of blah, 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 but feel free, let it rip. You have my permission. Okay. Having said that, then let me find out, first of all, oh, by the way, I understand this class is from 12:30 to 2:30. Is that correct?
I thought it was 12 to 3, so 12:30 to 2:30 is excellent. Let's do it.
Well, some people have been saying 12:30 to 2:30. That's why I asked. Does everybody, what have you been
I was
told?
not given a specific time frame for the class, so
You weren't given a time?
Only a login time.
no, only they told me to start at 12:30. That's it.
Yeah, interesting. Anyway, I'll confirm.
The BIF's schedule for fall semester was saying 12 to 3.
12 to 3. Okay. So basically a 2.5 hour session. All right, that's fine. I'll confirm that to make sure that that is correct. So for all intents and purposes, we have until 3 o'clock to ramble on. Whatever you do, some sessions I may let you out a little bit before 3 because I don't do breaks. I just keep rambling on until the end. So if I say, okay, we're breaking 2:40, 2:45 or something, then that's because you need the break anyway. But if you see me looking like I'm trying to go past 3, I don't know what you're going to do. Ring the bell, say something, start coughing, whatever you need to do, so that I don't make it a habit. Okay? All right, fantastic. So before I go on then, let me find out who I should be talking to. over the next 10 weeks. And so when I call your name again, please introduce yourself to me and to your colleagues in this class. And then tell me why you're doing this course and anything else you feel like where you work, whether or not they should vote Trump back in again, anything you want to say. All right, starting with Kendra. Kendra, let it rip.
I just had a feeling that you were going to call my name first.
Right at, right at
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kendra Kelly. I am currently a corporate administrator at Delaney Partners in the Corporate Bahamas. I'm doing this class as part as just to gain additional knowledge to what I am already curriculum. So this is just something I'm just trying to get under my belt.
Okay, sounds good. Well, the good thing about the under the belt thing is a lot of people think that corporate governance is just for like some specific group of people, like board of directors, members, and audit committees and CEOs and all that stuff. But the truth of the matter is, while they drive it, everybody in the organization should be made aware of it and should be reminded of it as part of their program every time. Because the corporate governance,
sir.
yeah, absolutely, Kendra. There are corporate governance violations going on at all levels of the organizations, all over the world, all entities, all types, charities, churches even included, believe it or not. They're required to follow governance requirements as well, maybe from a different perspective than some
Yes,
financial
sir.
retail, but the governance requirement is still there. So you are definitely in the right place. By the way, when you send me your email, please include your place of employment and your telephone contact as well, so I can make sure I have that. Perhaps this will send it, but I would feel great if you can send it in your email to me. That would confirm that I have exactly the right information, okay? So send me the email, send me your place of employment, send me your phone contact. And I'll have everything I need in case I need to touch base with you guys. Okay, thank you so much, Kendra. Welcome aboard. Okay, Alson Ferguson.
Good afternoon.
Alson,
My name is Alson Ferguson, better known as Ali.
okay,
I work at BCSD, stands for Bahamas Central Securities Depository,
no,
and we deal with the local share market in the Bahamas. And
interesting.
because of that, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the corporate governance course.
Yeah, you definitely need to do the corporate governance, anything, because that BCSD, is it?
That's BCSD.
Yeah, that's a very interesting place, is it not?
Very.
Yes. And without giving any trade secrets, can you tell your colleagues who may not be familiar with that just a little bit about what goes on down there, because they might not know. No, you don't have to give away any trade secrets or any corporate governance issues that are not working.
We are responsible for the local share registers in the Bahamas, and now coming on board, we have one or two of the government bonds register, and we are responsible for all corporate governance of the various companies, such as their dividend payment, interest payment, and annual general meetings.
Very interesting stuff, Alson. Absolutely.
And I think once we become a full-fledged CSD, which is for the international word security, Central Security Depository, we'll become somewhat a semi-regulatory board in the market.
Indeed. By the way, Alson, I just saw a note from Shatoya. Did you see it? In the chat. Shatoya had something say she said, Alson, you ain't hiring it. So she's showing up. she's throwing out her thing, so I don't blame her. Way to go. Okay? Being quiet doesn't get you a bloody thing. That's the whole point. Okay? Way to go, Shatoya. Now he's in your class. You know his name. Find a way to get to him and find out if they're hiring. And the only thing they can tell you is what? Yes
Oh, no.
or no. And if they tell you no in 6 months, go back again. If they say hell no from the first time, then a year later go back. That's how about that? All right. So thank you very much for that, Alison. That's a big old job uh, that you guys are doing down there. I'm not surprised that you're now becoming eventually a quasi-regulatory institution because making sure that share registers are up to date, correct, and accurate for all entities who are out there involved in the securities market in particular, making sure the dividend payments are correctly done and done on time and done according to the rules and the laws and the bylaws and all this crazy stuff. That is no small matter, correct?
Correct.
Absolutely. Interestingly enough, there are a lot of people who don't seem to be aware of the serious job that you guys are doing. You guys a little quiet now and they're doing what you do. Perhaps that might be on purpose, but then there are a lot of people who have no idea still of the importance of that job that you guys do down at BCSD. Okay, so keep up the good work. It's absolutely crucial stuff. And it's very important that that job is done according to the governance requirements of that organization. So you are in the right place. All right. Some of this stuff you hear and read up and it's being tested on. Some of it you might already know, Alison, but there might be some stuff you could add to your repertoire so that when you get out there, you can ask some other salient questions of your constituents to make sure that they stay on the up and up. Because people are always looking for an avenue to do something that is not governance required, whether we don't believe it or not, always. Okay, so good stuff, Alison. Thank you very much for that insight and welcome aboard. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Shatoya, you have no excuse now. You know what to do. All right. Jeffries McKinney.
Hi, my name is Jeffries McKinney. I work to a commercial bank. I'm taking the course because I had originally applied for a position and I was turned down and told to get some experience in this sector. So I said, why not?
Excellent. You didn't just panic and say to hell with you and keep your stinking job.
No, sir.
Good. Okay, welcome aboard. You're definitely in the right place. And when you're done, if they continue, then you go back. Same as Shatoya, go back. Said, I'm ready now. And they say, well, we're not ready yet. Then you wait and then you go back and say, I'm ready now. And then while you do that, you go some other place and say, I'm ready for here too.
Yes, sir.
Guess what happens? Eventually, somebody will call you.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Welcome aboard, Jeffries. You're definitely in the right place. Because this this stuff you're going to learn over the next couple of weeks is going to benefit you and any organization you work for now or in the future for sure. All right. Thank you. Shatoya King.
Hi.
Hi, Shatoya. Let it rip.
So my name is Shatoya King. I work for Scotia Bank Freeport branch. I'm a CSO, a customer service officer. I'm taking this class because I'm ready for the next role. I'm ready to move on. So to move on, you need to gain more knowledge. So hence why I'm trying to expand my knowledge.
Fantastic. You are definitely in the right place. Anything you learn in this session will not go down the drain. Sooner or later, it will be of great benefit to you, even if you cannot see it right away. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Good stuff. All right, Annalisa Sands.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Annalisa.
Hi, my name is Annalisa Sands, like Shatoya. I'm employed at Scotiabank Freeport.
Okay.
Yes. And I pretty much joined this class just to gain knowledge on exactly what corporate governance is about, policies, procedures, principles, just to see what companies adhere to or are guided by, pretty much.
Very good. Man, even though you haven't done any of the blah, 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 you already know what you'd like to see. And
Yes.
those words that you use are exactly the words that you will see over and over in one form or another during this session. So you are in the right place. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. And maybe when you're done, you can say to some of your other colleagues who are hanging around, you should do that because there's some stuff you need to know. Okay, for sure.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, welcome aboard. Lucia. Roll.
Hi.
Hi, Lucia.
So, like my colleagues, I'm a employee of Scotiabank Freeport as well.
Okay. Great. Oh, former Scotia bankers. I mean, sorry, I'm a former Scotia banker. So that
Oh,
it's like music. That was a million years ago. You guys may not even have been born yet. How about that? Keep going, Lucia.
so I'm in this class to gain some more insight on the practices of effective governance,
Okay.
also the principles that are involved,
Yes.
so that one day when the time comes, I can be able to effectively lead
That
when I
sounds
reach into corporate sector.
that sounds good to me. Whether you're there or wherever. That's the whole point.
Yes.
Okay. No doubt the institution that you work for is high on governance, I would like to think. And they are high on governance issues, not because the issue of governance just came into play some time back, but Scotiabank has always had a reputation for trying to maintain its reputation. True or false? Scotiabankers?
Very true.
Very much.
Yes.
I just want you guys to know that that is nothing new. They have been that way for decades and decades. You should know that Scotiabank has been in the Bahamas for just about 100 years, just under.
Right.
Yep. We've been around here a long time conducting governance issues in one form or another. So now you guys are going to learn the formal stuff so that you can carry that legacy forward. How's that? All right, way to go, Lucia. Good stuff. Welcome aboard. Is Joyanne in the room yet? Not yet. Okay, Renee. Renee Kalma, introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Renee Comer here. I'm here as a refresher course for myself. I've been company secretary for a number of companies for a number of years. We've
Yeah.
got regulatory bodies that we respond to, central banks, Securities Commission, Compliance Commission, and every day it seems to be more and more. So a refresher course can't hurt. And I'm particularly interested in the financial literacy. I haven't been doing too much financial things lately. So I'm excited for that section of things, but I'm here for refresher.
Excellent, excellent. That's the way to go.
Yeah,
Does not hurt to stay up to date on stuff. A couple of new and interesting things always pops up somewhere.
absolutely.
And if you're not part of the day-to-day in terms of accounting and related issues, then certainly anything you hear will be of benefit to you. A lot of governance violations occur in the field, in the area of accountancy and finance and securities. And so, yeah, we're going to chit chat a little bit about that side of it, talk about financial statements, give you a little bit of insight on what they look like, how they work, how they can be violated, how they can not conform to proper governance. Because we've seen, some of us note that a lot of firms have been fined, for example, for cooking the books in accounting. Anybody ever heard that expression, cooking the books?
Indeed.
Yeah, cooking the books. For those of you who may not know what cooking the books is in accounting, cooking the book means putting financial information in balance sheets and income statements that never occurred, that are untrue, and that cannot be verified, just to make the financial statements look better, to satisfy regulatory, shareholder, other requirements. Okay? That is unethical. That is a direct violation of government's requirements and so on. And this is one of the reasons why I'm throwing it in here. So those of you who may not be involved with it from day to day can know that that is part of your governance responsibility, or certainly your organization's governance responsibility. Okay. So way to go, Renee. You are definitely in the right place for a refresher. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All right. By the way, Renee, there are some persons in your class that might not understand what you mean by company secretary. They might think you're a typist. Is that what you are?
It feels that way sometimes, but
We're not talking about the operational side of your work. Tell them a little bit about the non-typing side of your work.
so company secretary, I attend all the board meetings. I take the minutes. I prepare resolutions for any decisions that are made in the company. I prepare agendas and send them out, and I try to ensure that the board is aware of all that it needs to be aware of, and corporate governance is the order of the day.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Renee. I hope somebody in this room has been enlightened. Because
Okay.
sometimes people, when they hear company secretary, they say, oh, she's an executive secretary. She's just the boss's typist who sets the meetings and so on. Yeah, she sets meetings, but she's a special kind of company secretary. She's a company secretary that is legally required at the board level. Okay? She is not optional. Her responsibility is not optional at the board level. She sits in at every board meeting and hears all the juicy stuff, records it, and is therefore required to be super confidential, which is another governance issue because confidentiality is still a big problem for some organizations and some persons who are required to be confidential. Okay, so yeah, Renee can burn down the house with the information she has if she wants to. That's how serious that particular job is. Okay, so she's walking around with a lot of secrets.
A lot.
Yes, all right. So it's a big, serious job. For those of you who may not have known who a legal company secretary is that sits at the board level. Okay, all right. Way to go, Renee. Good stuff. All right. Who's this? Janisha Miller.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janisha Miller. I'm a Scotia banker as well.
Yes.
I'm in retail banking. I'm a personal banking officer, or most other banks would refer to us as lenders or loan officers.
Yes.
And I'm taking this course because I want to have an appreciation for executive level of decision making,
Yes.
as well as I want to be better prepared for promotions or new roles, new directions in the bank. So just one of my focuses this year was personal development, and this is one of the things that I want to check off my list.
Excellent. This is a good start. And as soon as you're done and pass your course, you send it in to your people so they'll know you are deadly serious about what you want. Okay?
Will do.
Come aboard, Janisha. Okay, Teresita Small.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tricita Small. I'm taking this course as a refresher due to a recent promotion into the operations department of my organization. As everyone may be aware, operations is the nucleus or the control center for any operation because it touches each and every department. So there is a need to have a full understanding of corporate governance so that you can actually identify areas and that may be of concern that need to be addressed. to ensure that the company is compliant with all industry standards as they may change, and be on top of those as well.
Sounds good, sounds good. And you're absolutely right. It's an ongoing battle. It doesn't ever come to an end. When you fix one fire, the other fire comes up. So you have to always be aware of what the problems are and seek to resolve them. Okay, so welcome aboard, Teresita. In your update, it's always a good idea to do it from time to time, no matter what. Okay, and of course, for those of you who may not be aware of the operational side of anything, that's kind of like the heart of stuff where all the blah, blah, blah goes on. And so it's a huge responsibility to keep the engines churning while the boards are eating caviar and persons down the line are having fun with the minimum responsibility. That operational thing is a madhouse for the most part, but it's absolutely crucial. If that stops, everything stops. Okay, so good stuff, Teresita. Welcome aboard. All right, Gia Ferguson. Gia?
Good afternoon. Yeah, sorry. Good afternoon. Gia Ferguson. I have 17 years in banking. I've been working at Scotiabank Freeport branch. I'm currently in the role of a service and support officer. And why I joined this class, or what I would like to gain from this class, is basically just to expand my knowledge as it relates to corporate governance and what it takes to make it effective, and increase my knowledge on financial literacy. I'm most excited about that part, as I want to eventually go into accounting. So I'm looking forward to taking in and absorbing all of the knowledge that this class would give to me, in both aspects.
Interesting, Gia, because now you then, because you're interested in accounting at all, you get to kill two birds with one shot.
Yes.
Because some of the concepts that will be discussed for the majority of it, of the literacy side, will have to do with accounting and practices and communication documents like financial statements, etc. So you get a little bit of insight, as everybody else will, on the existence and purpose of those things, and the importance of those particular reports and information to the governance process, which, as I said earlier, a lot of violations occur because that's where the money is. See? That's where the money is recorded, received, dispersed, managed, and ravaged, depending on what's going on. All right. So yeah, definitely, Gia, you're in the right place. Welcome aboard.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Last but not least is Alexandria Feaster. Alexandria.
I'm here.
Okay, introduce yourself to us.
My name is Alexandra Feaster. I work to the Central Bank of Bahamas in the Bank Supervision Department. I know all about corporate governance, and I joined the class for Model Financial Literacy Part. My job description just recently changed, and I'm doing more quarterly reports. So it's just more of a refresher to ensure that, I get them done quickly and efficiently.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And hopefully some of those, some of the accounting and related principles that we talk about will just give you some more insight. So when you see the numbers rolling in and you're having to send numbers out, you'll be, okay, great. So that's what that's all about. And then
I know all about corporate governance.
Oh, lovely. So the one part is refreshing, the other part is like, okay, let me see what the heck's going on. All right, so welcome aboard, Alexandria. Alexandria is a regulator. Alison is a regulator to be, and a form of regulator anyway, informally. So we have basically two regulators in our midst. So those of you who may have quote unquote regulatory questions that you're curious to ask, you may raise them in this class. And if it's an answer that Alison or Alexandria can respond to, I'm sure they would be happy to do it. to help you to enhance your knowledge of regulatory requirements. Because as you know, or should know, and if you don't know, regulators are here to stay. They are going nowhere. They're going to be a thorn in anybody's side who doesn't want to be compliant. And it's either their way or the highway. True or false, Alexandria? True or false, Alson?
True.
Yes, true. Okay. When I say their way or the highway, I don't mean that they're a bunch of stinky people waiting to drop a bomb on you every time. That's not what I mean. Their job is to make sure that institutions remain compliant and do things properly and make sure that the governance practices adhere to what is required. That's all they want you to do. If you don't do that, then they're going to be in your ear to make sure you do it. If you insist on not doing it, then they're there to make sure that you don't persist in doing it in this economy, in this environment, in the Commonwealth. That's all. Okay, it's not a big deal. All right, we just need to follow through and do what we need to do. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. Now we know what we know, and we know who's in our class. Did everybody get a course outline from BIFS?
I don't believe I received one.
Did you see the advertisement then for this particular class? A big
I did.
says class start.
I did get a course outline.
Okay. The ad piece would have had the outline for basic outline for the semester, but in any event, I'll prepare a little blah 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 for you so that you can know what we'll be looking at for the next 10 weeks, essentially. But for the most part, our discussions will be primarily on governance and financial literacy. But I'll do a little thing for you so that you can have a point of reference. And certainly for those of you who want to read forward, the outline will help you to know what to read next. If you can't sleep at night and looking for something exciting to do, you can read forward. Okay, how's that? All right, a little bit more housekeeping before we get into the discussion of corporate governance. For the record, there will be 2 examinations for this course. The examinations are not designed to drive you crazy. They're designed just to make sure that you do the reading so that you can be familiar with the information. And so that you do a little preparation, not just kind of say, well, I'll just wing it and see what I remember. Okay. It's going to be a midterm examination and a final examination. The examinations are going to be primarily definitions like what is corporate governance, what is an audit committee, differentiate between the CEO and the chairman of the board. What are the responsibilities of the 2 of them? See, things like that. Nothing to drive you totally crazy. Nothing you shouldn't be able to handle if you've actually read stuff and do a little preparation. So you should be fine. Definitions and short answer questions will be the structure of both examinations. Okay? Your first exam will be worth 40%. Your second exam, which is the final exam, will be 40%. I am going to give you a case study. Now, the case study has some questions for you to answer, and really it's just designed not for you, again, to pull out your hair and get all crazy, but really for you to see a real world example. I think it's set in Brazil or something, because Brazil has a lot of governance issues. For those of you who don't know, they've been accused of a whole lot of bribery, fraudulent, and other activities. MPs being paid off by companies so that the MPs can pass laws that are good for the companies and profitable for them, etc., which of course we know bribes and frauds and that kind of stuff are illegal and definitely the enemy of corporate governance. It's what we call bad corporate governance. All right, so I think this case is set in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. for you to read up and then answer a couple questions, just so that you can get your hands dirty and actually dealing with a real life matter. All right. So I'll send
And you said the first test would be how much percent?
40%.
So both 40.
Yes.
Okay.
Case
Thank
study. You're welcome. The case study will be 10%. Okay. And the other 10% will be for class attendance and participation. And I'm always happy to give that 10% to students who show up and who participate in any form or fashion. Now, some students have asked me in the past, well, suppose I only ask 1 or 2 questions, does that mean I get penalized because I only ask 1 or 2 questions? Suppose I don't ask any questions. Well, please don't worry about that side of that things. I will use my discretion in terms of the participation side. All I'm doing is asking you to jump in whenever you feel like you need to. If you have any questions, if you want further feedback, if you have any questions even for your colleagues, just throw them out. And all together, it'll come together to assist you in that area. So that's not an area to be worried about. Okay? It's just to encourage you to do so. All right.
Mr. Wilkinson, what is the passing grade?
The passing grade? 999.
Yes.
Well, I don't think anybody in this class will be failing this class. But since you asked, it is not an option in this class. Okay?
Never an option, never an option.
No, absolutely not. From what I can see, you will get either an A, a B, or a C. There's no discussion after C. So if you get under 50 overall, you fail this class. If you get 50 or over, you're somewhere in A, B, or C. Okay? So all you need to do at the end of the day to pass this class is get 50 or more altogether when I've averaged everything together, both examinations, your case study, and your participation and attendance class. Okay? And I don't think there's anybody in this class who cannot do that. You have to just miss most of your classes, don't read, don't review, don't prepare, and you have to do something crazy not to do that. Okay? So failure is not an option in this class. Okay? Anybody who thinks that they want to get under 50% of my class, I will call the cops. Okay? So you've been forewarned. All right. Any other questions before we go on? Okay. Wonderful. Well, when I send you the outline, you'll see week by week what we intend to cover. Let me just give you a little quick insight for the first 4 weeks so you'll have an idea. I believe Miguel has given you some material that we will use for this course. Okay. I might throw in 1 or 2 bits and pieces in addition to that, but the material that you have is primarily the material that we will be using for the next couple of weeks. All right. So week 1, which is today, we will talk about the definition and benefits of corporate governance. And we will also talk about, time permitting today, the guiding principles of corporate governance, which I think you have in your notes. Okay, that's week number 1 today. Week number 2, next week, we will talk about the Central Bank of the Bahamas corporate governance guidelines, because they have some very specific guidelines, especially for financial institutions. And it seems like most of you work for financial institutions or regulatory. So particularly those in financial institutions, that should be of interest in terms of what should be happening in your firm. Okay? And also next week, we'll look at the OECD corporate governance principles. For those of you who may not be familiar with the OECD, hopefully most of you are, please just Google it, do a quick paragraph or two read to see who the OECD is, so that when you start reading those principles and guidelines, you'll know who they are. Okay, they're the ones. These are a bunch of guys in Europe who decided that they'd get together and create this economic conglomerate called the OECD. And their job would be to establish these corporate governance by which they expected the world to follow in one form or another. And essentially, that's what we're doing. Okay. Of course, different countries have their perspectives, but essentially, the OECD corporate governance is considered to be, to some extent, the gold standard of corporate governance for financial entities and others. And so we will be looking at those basic OECD principles, from which many other corporate governance principles in the Bahamas and around the world are based. Okay? So that's our week number 2. For week number 3, we'll continue with CBOV, Central Bank of the Bahamas Corporate Governance, but we'll be looking at specific areas, Appendix 1 and 2, where we look at committees and certifications and so on, just so that you can get some more information on what the regulators are looking for specifically in the world of corporate governance and the kinds of things that should be adhered to in the entity or organization that you work for. Okay? Also in week number 3, I have an interesting article, if I can remember that. I will send that to you so that we can read it, because it has some very current and salient points on up and kicking contemporary governance requirements. It's not a new wheel, it's just additional information and updates that might be helpful to persons out there in the world of work, in case you see it. So we'll go through that. And then, of course, in week number 4, final discussion on governance will be with regards to ethics and compliance and how they relate to the governance process. Okay? So basically, that is our task for the next 4 weeks, essentially, in the governance field. And then, of course, week number 5, you will have your first test, which will be a midterm exam, and it will be based on our discussions in those areas. Okay. Then, of course, after the midterm, the remaining 4 sessions will be on financial and accounting literacy. And then in week number 10, you will have your final exam. But I'm going to send you a little schedule so you can have that information as a point of reference. Also, I will be sending you this weekend your case study so you can get started. The case study is due in week number 9, which is the week before your final exam. So you have the entire semester to prepare it. Please don't wait until the last minute, like week number 8, to start working on it. Do a little bit each time, answer a question a week, or whatever works for you, so that you don't be stressed out trying to finish it at the very last minute. Okay? If you do not see your case study by Monday, which by the way is a holiday, that's fabulous. Please send me an email and say, excuse me, Mr. Wilkinson, case study, and I'll send it to you. But that's what I intend to do. All right. Any questions before we go on? Okay, great. Then let's.
Sorry, Mr. Wilkinson, quick question. Will the recorded Zoom sessions be distributed to the class?
Well, I think you can access them if you want to. Speak with Miguel and company. They will tell you how to link it up so that you can access it if you need to.
Thank you.
Okay? Quite welcome. Quite welcome.
Question as well, Mr. Wilkinson. I wasn't clear on the duration of the class.
10 weeks.
No, I mean, sorry, not the class itself. The time, how many hours are we going to go for each session?
12:30 to 3.
Okay, thanks.
So that's 2.5 hours. So yeah, for the most part, we'll be working somewhere between 2:30 and 3. Just make sure that if I look like I'm going over 3 o'clock, like over 3 o'clock, make sure I have a good reason, start rattling, cough, whatever, send a note in the chat like hello, anything like that. It wouldn't upset me because sometimes, depending on the nature of the material, we might find ourselves getting to that point, and I don't want to do that too often because 2.5 hours is more than enough for you guys to be sit and we're not going to have any breaks. So somewhere between the last half an hour, I can say at any time, okay, that's it. It's been a long day already. See you next week. Okay. So, but essentially, it's from 12:30 to 3 o'clock. Okay. All right. So, and again, I'm going to be chit-chatting about stuff initially, and you will be involved as well. I'm not going to let you guys off the hook just sitting back having coffee straight through. I'm going to be asking students to say something, read to us, talk to us, whatever the case might be, so that we can make it as interactive as possible and get as many persons as possible to get involved. Because part of corporate governance is not just identifying issues, but being able to communicate it, not only communicate it in writing, but also communicate it verbally. So I can see already from the introductions that students do not have a problem with verbal discourse, and that's wonderful. And certainly part of their responsibilities might be actually making presentations and so on. So you're gonna be involved in the process as well, in terms of reading material as we discuss it along the way. I'm not going to spend the full time just talking down about all this crazy stuff. Crazy but important, crazy but crucial. Okay. All right. And again, just a reminder, whatever I'm saying, if you want to say something, then please, you can interrupt me. You can say question, or you can make a note of your question and ask it when there's a break in transmission somewhere. But don't let that stop you from raising it. Okay. All right. So then, what is corporate governance? Why doesn't somebody take a shot? What is corporate governance, anyone? Based on your experience so far, what do you think it is?
Corporate governance is the overseeing and management of a company or organization.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody else wants to add to that? It's definitely the overseeing of the organization. What else can we add to that?
Catering to the moral senses of the company.
Yes, the moral sense of the company. Now that's where things always get tricky. See, here's the point, students. Oftentimes folks don't have any problem with the definition of overseeing. Like we like to oversee stuff, and that's crucial. But the question is, in overseeing stuff, where is the moral compass? What is that company's board's position on what is right and what is wrong? Therein lies the problem. All the other things that we do in the world of governance, all the directive by regulators, all the concepts by the OECD, all the classes that we do to inform ourselves, it's all about moving that moral compass in the right direction. Because a lot of boards and shareholders and organizations have information. The problem is they are abusing the moral compass. If they were not abusing the moral compass, many regulators would not even be necessary. But they are, because companies continuously and consistently, not all of them, not all the time, seek to abuse the moral compass. Okay, that is the key. So governance then is about overseeing. It's about looking at the company's moral compass and determining how companies are directed and controlled. That is the essence of corporate governance. It doesn't stop there, but that is the foundation. We are going to see all kinds of information to support that position, but that's where it begins. Overseeing, moral compass, direction, and control. Anybody who sits on a board should always be thinking about those things. Any employee who works for a company should at least be aware in one form or another of those requirements. Because of course, the board sends directions down, but the employees are responsible for making sure that things work. The employees of the firm are the actual gatekeepers. Just as with regulators, financial institutions are expected to be the gatekeepers to try to ensure that things go according to the governance requirements for these institutions. So why is governance needed then? Well, first of all, governance is needed so that the board of directors of the firm can properly control it. Basically, in the real world, there are two types of governance. There is good corporate governance, and there is bad corporate governance. Some firms, like everything else in the world, some firms choose to be on the good side of corporate governance, and some firms seem to be on the bad side of corporate governance. Interestingly enough, there are some firms in the world, and notice I didn't say financial institutions, because financial institutions are just one type of firm that should be governed by corporate governance principles. And for this class, perhaps the majority of you are part of financial institutions, so this will relate directly to your organization. But bear in mind that governance requirements, see, the guy from BCST, it's not only a financial institutions requirement, it's a requirement for other entities as well, in terms of how they control, direct, operate, and move that moral compass. Okay? So this is why we keep talking about the board of directors all the time, because most of the real problems with those companies that are involved in bad governance is at the board level, believe it or not at the teller level, not at the cashier's level in the retail store and all that stuff, and not oftentimes not even at middle management level. A lot of governance violations, the majority of them where the big bucks are concerned, where the huge losses are concerned, occur at the board level, which means that you will see when you start reading your material and you start looking at that there's a whole lot of things that boards are required to do, because that's where the head lies and that's where the greatest responsibility lies. And that's why regulators, shareholders, and others have been trying to put boards in place that they believe will do the right thing in the interest of their entities. Okay? Now, some people have said already that certain white-collar criminals at the board level seem to escape prison all too often. They seem to get away maybe with a fine, maybe with just losing their jobs, and that perhaps the penalties for some of the persons at this level ought to be greater. Well, there have been some persons who didn't escape, but some people feel they're not enough, because most of the scandals that involve the millions and billions of dollars tend to start or emanate, unfortunately, at the board level. Okay? It's not a good thought, but unfortunately, it is true. Now, the other side of the governance process are those persons who own the companies, the entities. They're called shareholders or members, or whatever the case might be, but they're the owners of these entities. They too are expecting the board to do the right thing, to move the moral compass in the right direction. Because shareholders have an interest in the company being successful. They want to continue to get dividends forever and ever. They want to pass the dividends on to their offspring. They want to have it that they can inherit a continuous payments of dividends. They want the share prices to continue to go up and not down. They want the company to be successful and to be around as long as possible. So shareholders have a very, very great concern in corporate governance requirements. And those shareholders who are on top of the game, who is involved with the company, because not all shareholders monitor the company, they just wait for dividend payments. Right? But for those who are watching, they are very concerned about what board members are doing. And in some cases, where board members do not follow through with proper governance, the keen shareholders will remove that board in part or in whole and put in a new board in an effort to get the kind of compliance and governance that they require, which is a good thing. Right? Sometimes some board members, they get out of hand, okay? And they start doing some weird stuff, okay? And that is not what we want to see, okay? We want the board of directors to keep the moral compass where it should be. We want the shareholders to be watching them to make sure that they adhere to the rules, and so that we can keep the regulators and or the shareholders happy about what's going on in the firm. I'm sure many of you may have heard about the violations from big banks like Credit Suisse and UBS and some others who keep coming up with KYC and monitoring violations and all kinds of institutions, petroleum institutions in Brazil who are paying bribes to politicians and all this crazy stuff. They keep getting fined and they keep doing it. They get fined and they keep doing it. And the question is, like, when are they going to quit? Well, nobody knows when they're going to quit, which is why this issue of governance is a prevailing issue, and we have to constantly be upgrading our information, our knowledge, our introspection, the way we deal with it, the way we regulate it, etc., so that we can try to minimize these violations. Okay? Question for the floor. Should we be seeking to imprison more violators of corporate governance at the board level? Anyone can answer that question. Should we be imprisoning more persons at the board level for violations? Governance
You
violations.
mean on a Bahamian level or overall in the whole world?
Bahamian and the world.
I think we don't have a federal prison here, so I don't think it will really be effective. But overall in the world, yes.
So in other words, in other countries where they are clearly violating the governance requirements, more of them should perhaps be imprisoned.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I agree with you. Anybody else? I completely agree. Any other thoughts? But the problem is, while that in fact should happen, and every blue moon we might have an isolated case, for some reason, countries and entities seem to be reluctant. For example, if even in the Bahamas, where there's a violation, there's just this reluctance, like, really lock up a board member? My God. Like, we are reluctant to do it at that level. However, if a teller at Scotiabank runs short and she needs $50 to make up the school fee for her child, and she takes it out of the cash and they find out, what are they likely to do, class? What are they like? Yeah, maybe fire her or him, ban them from their jobs, or any combination of these things because of the violation. So we don't have any problems like dealing with people severely, so to speak, down the line. But when it comes to dealing with board members, we seem equivocal about doing it, like unsure what we should do. Does anybody have any idea why that might be?
Is it because of their reputation? They don't want to, I guess,
tarnish their reputation, that's the whole point of actually giving them such a harsh punishment so that they would be deterred from actually doing it again or deterring others from trying to do what they did.
Absolutely. Couldn't give a better answer myself. The problem is we're worried about reputation, but when in fact the violation of the governance requirements is a reputational issue in and of itself. And so it remains a mystery why countries and entities, particularly entities, do not take more severe actions. Every now and then, a board member might be removed, an entire board may be fired, or whatever the case might be. But the general feeling is, given the amount of violations in and around the world, we certainly do not have enough punishment at that level. Certainly not at the same point as we have down the level with other issues in any particular country entity. Okay? So yeah, that is a concern, and it continues to be a concern, especially since the board of directors they are legally responsible for governing the company. It's not an option. It's not like if you feel like it in your opinion. When you join a board, you are legally responsible for its governance, which means that if you're legally responsible and you do something illegal, there should be the harshest possible consequences. And I suspect that boards will not begin to behave better until the consequences become harsher. For at the moment, they are not harsh enough. And so there are many boards that still continue to decide to do as they please. And regulators in the Bahamas and around the world are well aware of these kinds of problems in some instances and try to take measures to deal with them. The point is, with all the issues that occur around the board that is legally responsible for governance, a bunch of board members all too often still seek to violate. It's a fascinating thing. And sometimes they even get some shareholders involved with the process of bad governance, which means that they not only violate the legal requirement at the board level, but they actually influence shareholders and others to participate, including senior management, with the agenda. And of course, any staff member who seeks to blow the whistle on this, all too often, many of them. Anybody ever heard about a whistleblower?
Yes, sir.
Who are they?
They're the people that bring awareness to whatever is going wrong or wrongdoings in a corporation.
Yes. Are whistleblowers popular or unpopular?
Very unpopular.
Depends on who you ask, eh?
Yeah,
But,
very unpopular. Now, since this is a governance class, we have to talk about these things because all of these things influence how we manage, handle, report, and deal with governance issues. So, if the whistleblower is unpopular, what makes the whistleblower unpopular? Why are they unpopular if they are reporting wrongdoing?
People don't like snitches.
Yeah, people do not like snitches. Even board members who are doing wrong do not want to be snitched on. Imagine that. Right? Should they be snitched on?
They should if it's wrong.
Of course. No, of course. If it's right, you don't have a problem. The only time a whistleblower blows, let me tell you a secret. When organizations are doing the right thing, you don't hear anything from whistleblowers. See my point? The only time you hear from whistleblowers in an organization is when they perceive that something is going wrong. That's why we call them whistleblowers. And the reason why we use the word whistleblowers is because, like, anybody ever seen a policeman with a whistle? When they blow the whistle, what does that mean?
Something
Stop,
going wrong.
because something is
Call
going on.
attention.
Absolutely, to call attention. That's why we call them whistleblowers. And in the case of the firm, it's to call attention to what's wrong. My. It's a very sore area, but really it's the essence of all the things we're going to be discussing, because we're going to be discussing this thing from a regulatory perspective, CBOB, central bank, and OECD perspective, and others. But the whole idea, all of the rules that are in place are designed to keep the moral compass going in the right direction and to keep whistleblowers from blowing their whistles. How about that? Okay, so keep that in mind. But bear in mind, first and foremost, boards have a legal responsibility for proper governance, period. The shareholders, on the other hand, who are the owners of the company, their role in the governance process is to seek to appoint boards that will do the right thing. And if any board member or members or the entire boards are violating governance requirements, the shareholders' job is to remove them. Now, how often we do it and how well that is done is a whole other governance issue. But that is the shareholders' job, other than collecting dividends and looking at share prices, which they hope will go up. Their governance responsibility is that, because the shareholders are the only ones who have the right to remove the board, the power. And so when we talk about governance, we at the company, the highest level in the company, we're not only talking about the board, which drives the company, but we're talking about the shareholder responsibility who appoints the board to drive the company. Okay? Something to keep in mind. And let's not forget this part of the governance process.
I have a question.
Yes, we let it go. Question.
Sorry.
You
say
me.
you say the shareholders are the only persons that can remove the board member.
Generally, yes.
So what if a particular board member is doing something that the shareholders didn't catch whiff of, but other board members catch whiff of it? They still have to rely on the shareholders to say, take them off. Like they can't just come together and say, Joe, I don't want you on the board anymore.
Yes, very good question. And the answer to that is the board can fire a board member.
Okay.
The board can ask a board member to resign. Absolutely. All right. And the reason why, and that's a good point. The reason why, and that was coming second. The reason why that was coming second is because I want you to understand the role and power of the shareholders. Because in some companies, shareholders are very quiet, very dormant, and they don't understand the authority and the power that they have. And some board members do not educate them either, because basically the board members want them to be ignorant. So that some boards are not there just for the interest of the company. That's another problem. Some board members are sitting on the board for their own self-interest. That's a whole other discussion. And this is why the moral compass gets a little messed up. Because once you start throwing self-interest in, then all kinds of funny things start to happen. Okay? But yes, the board can fire a board member. The board can ask a board member to resign. Okay? But bear in mind, first and foremost, that the ultimate and initial power lies with the owners of the company. Okay? Who are the shareholders? Let's not forget the auditors. What is the role of any auditor? Does anybody know? What is the role of the auditor?
The auditor, the persons who actually like review all of company's information to make sure that everything is above board, like to make sure everything is in line.
Absolutely. Okay, that is the job of the auditor. Okay, and this is where the issue of financial information comes into play, because remember, the moral compass does not only involve whether the board is doing things right or wrong from a staffing perspective, fraudulent perspective, bribery, and all this other kind of stuff, but also with regards to financial reporting of information to ensure that what is sitting in those financial statements are true and correct, and they're not cooking the books and fixing numbers to satisfy their own personal agendas, whatever they might be. Okay? And so the auditor's job really is to come in to make sure that what they say it is actually what it is. They're not calling anybody a liar yet. They just come in, check stuff to verify. If things are not consistent with the policy and requirements of the company and generally accepted accounting principles, then the auditor's job is to blow the whistle. There you go. In its audit report to the board, it must report its findings, period. And it should not ever be influenced by any board member to change any information. Sometimes some board members try to get the auditors to change their report. Did you guys know that? Did anybody know that?
No.
And then- yeah, because who would believe it? And who should believe it? And why should that even be an issue? Because it should never be an issue. Unfortunately, though, it is an issue. But we'll see more of that maybe later when in our discussion of financial information. That's another gray area. Board influence over auditors. Kiss my foot. Nobody should be allowed to influence auditors. But if those of you who are reading on current events in the world of compliance and governance and finance, you will know that some auditors have come under scrutiny because they have been messing with their audit moral compass, which in Bahamian terms should never flicking happen. See, that's a Bahamian word for it should not. Not here, not anywhere. But recent evidence, information, court cases have shown that it has happened more often than it should. Okay? So we have another animal in the matrix of corporate governance. And the auditors are supposed to be the ultimate, along with regulators, protectors of the governance process. Never mind that the board has a legal responsibility and the shareholders are the owners of that responsibility. But after we pass that point, the regulators and the auditors are supposed to be the ultimate, last defense. And so if we find any issues in those two areas, then dog eat our lunch. All right. So some of the key responsibilities of the board of directors, and we'll see many, many more. Lots of things involved in making sure that governance is done properly, as you'll see. Okay? Key responsibilities. Number one, setting the company's objectives and their goals. That's the board's job. Number two, determining the strategy to achieve those goals. See, big job at the board level. And any kind of bad governance will mess with these objectives and responsibilities. That's the whole point. The board is responsible. Question.
Hi, can you repeat that first point, please?
First responsibility,
Yes, please.
Setting the company's objectives and goals. Number two, determining the strategy or the steps or the plans to achieve these goals. Number three, providing the leadership to put these goals into effect. Big job at the board level. They have a lot to do. Number four, supervising the management of the firm. My. So you're not just coming in to have a quick discussion, then have some caviar and wine and say, okay, we'll see you the next session. So a whole lot of responsibility. Number 4, supervising the management of the firm or business or entity. Doesn't matter what it is. And then number 5, for those for-profit entities, reporting to the shareholders. See? Reporting to the shareholders. So if you walk into a board and you say, can I see your shareholders report? And they say, we don't report to the shareholders, you have a serious governance problem. And some of them report to shareholders, they assume report everything. You still have a serious governance problem. Some of them report everything, but they don't always report the correct thing. You still have a serious governance problem. So I say those things just to say that while things might appear to be going as required on the surface, unless you have further information, experience, and knowledge, you will not know that a lot of things are not going on under the surface. My mind. For example, without a little accounting and finance information, you cannot tell or understand when the board is making changes to financial information that they shouldn't make, putting notes in the financial statements that are not true, and so on, because you don't really understand it. Of course, we rely on our auditors for this. And so if our auditors become compromised, and dog eat everybody's lunch. We can't help that. Our auditors themselves are required to follow the same high standard of governance in terms of how they do their work. Because all of us, shareholders, employees, regulators, and even the board itself, all of us rely on the audits, the auditor's report, and the auditor's good governance. If they decide to go rogue for some reason, wow, that's a whole other discussion. For now, let's just stick to the key stuff. Okay? Just thought I'd throw that there as a matter of interest at the moment. All right. So what are some of the best practices? And again, these points are just the initial things to get you to jump off the deep end today. We're going to be talking about all these things in more details in terms of what the OECD requires and what the central bank as a major regulator requires and so on. The kind of details that they expect that's supposed to go on within the firm in order to make this governance thing work. Okay? But for the moment, a couple of best practices to think about for corporate governance. Okay? Best practices for corporate governance, just to get things warmed up. Number 1, please take note. The role of the CEO and the chairman, especially in a public company, should be separated. The role of the CEO and the chairman, particularly in public companies, should be separated. Even if the company is a private company, it's always a good idea. Because if the same person is assuming both roles, then it's hard to get the independence that is required for both positions, since both of those positions have different governance responsibilities. Something to keep in mind. Okay? The CEO's role at the board level, the governance is different from the chairman's responsibility at the board level, which is why one person should not be doing both of those roles. Okay? There are some exceptions. Maybe if it's a small entity, we might say, fine, it's not big enough to be a problem. One person can assume both roles, perhaps. But generally speaking, as the firm gets bigger, if the firm is public, it's always a best practice in corporate governance to have them separated. Okay. Number 2, boards should have at least one. Boards should have at least one non-executive director. has anybody ever heard about a non-executive director? Anybody ever heard about that? NED? No? No, okay, interesting. Well, then that's why you're here. And today is not the last day you will hear about NEDs. NEDs or non-executive directors at the board level is a director who is required to be appointed so that they can add some greater objectivity to the board process. What does that mean? Oftentimes when boards are selected, they are made up of executives of the firm internally, CEO, finance officer, etc. Persons outside the firm, somebody's who's the executive of this, management person of that, a friend of somebody from that, somebody who sits on the church board, Bishop Tingham, whatever the case might be. So these persons are oftentimes part of a known group to each other. And so sometimes when people know each other in one form or another, one capacity, another, personal, professional, or both, and they sit on a board, then there's a tendency for the herd mentality to kick in and everybody to go in the same direction. And so sometimes, and that's okay as long as the same direction is making the proper decision. But sometimes that direction is a bad governance direction. And unfortunately, with the herd mentality, everybody goes in that direction too. Do we all agree? And nobody disagrees, even though somebody should.
Agree.
Okay? And so therefore, the NED is supposed to be that person or persons on the board who is expected to not agree when it's time to not agree, without being concerned or fearful about the consequences, like being ostracized by the board, like being threatened to lose their board position, like being asked to resign, like being threatened to be fired indirectly or directly by the board members, etc., just to get you to go with the herd. That is the job of the non-executive director. You will discover that when we get into our discussion with the Central Bank of the Bahamas requirements, that is a requirement as well as it is in any other jurisdictions. And for those of you who did not know before, the NED's job is to do just that, be the objective person on the board. If the herd is going in the wrong direction, their job is to object. If they don't like it, too bad. Let the minutes show that they objected. See my point? So which means that NEDs are not necessarily going to be a popular person if they're doing their jobs properly, but that's why they're there. The only problem with NEDs is when they discover you're an NED, they may not invite you back. So every session you have a new NED until they find out you won't go with the herd, then they don't invite you back. Unfortunately. But that is the job.
Question, so you're saying that the board won't know who the NED is?
They'll know. Here's what happens. The regulators and the rules require that they appoint an NED. So they appoint one. You follow?
Yes, sir.
To the board. But if they discover that when everybody's going one way, the NED keeps saying, I don't agree with it, what do you think is going to happen?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they start getting a little uptight with the NED, upset with that person, like, you keep objecting to what we're trying to do. And they said, yeah, because I think that's the wrong thing to do. Now, because the NED objects, question?
Isn't that in the case of a compliance officer?
The NED?
Well, the companies, rather than putting in the LED, they put a compliance officer who also is a sign-off signatory to say the things, and if they see the executives board doing something contrary, reports.
Yes, that's an interesting point. The only problem is, and we'll get to the compliance officer, because the compliance officer in many organizations have the same problem that NEDs have in a different way. The NED is a board member. The compliance officer may or may not be a board member, but the compliance officer has a similar but different responsibility. The NED is going to sit on the board as a board member like any board member and attend all regular board meetings, participate in the board decisions. If they agree, if the NED agrees, they agree. If they disagree, they will state the disagreement for the record. And that's fine. That doesn't mean the rest of the board members will not go ahead with the decision. But if the NED sees something going on that they don't think is right, they have a responsibility to object for the record. And if it's really going to be devastating to the company itself, they may have a responsibility to report to the regulators, perhaps, because something is going on that can be detrimental to the company. The point is, once the NED starts doing that, then they become targeted in many organizations. They shouldn't be targeted. Everybody on the board knows why there's an NED. But that doesn't change the fact that folks still want the NED to agree with everything too, because that's how we are as folk when we're doing what we do. Okay? We call it the human element, doggone it. But the human element has nothing to do with the requirement, but it has everything to do with it because it drives it, it influences it, and it oftentimes causes the NED, for example, to not necessarily do their jobs properly because they come under fire directly, indirectly, if they have too many objections to the board's work. So it's a very subtle area. Point though, the primary responsibility of the NED is to be objective when everybody else may not express the same objectivity to a particular issue at the board level. Similarly, a compliance officer's job is to look at what is compliant and what's not, and if they find anything that's not compliant, report it to the board. The problem is sometimes the issues of non-compliance is not always related to non-board members or board issues. Sometimes it's the board's fault. And depending on who that board is and the makeup of that board, they may not like that compliance report on them. And therefore, somebody with influence on that board might decide that they don't need such an efficient compliant officer. But again, that's a whole other ball game. Okay? On paper, the compliance officer's job is to do the review and to report their findings, period. Just like the auditor. And at the board level, the NED's job, if they have any objections, is to state it for the record. Whether or not they agree, doesn't matter. The NED's job is to state their point of view if they disagree on a particular point for the minutes and for the record. So that when regulators come in, for example, to read the minutes, they should be able to see the objection that is stated by the NED and raise any questions as to why that happened. Okay, so in case you didn't get it yet, we have two things going on. The requirements of the governance requirements that we need to be carrying out according to the law and to the rules and to the regulations and the guidelines on paper. And then, of course, what really happens in practice when the doors are closed. It's like marital rape. What really happens when the doors are closed? Because behind those doors is the chairman and the CEO of that company called the family. So who is going to know what the subtleties are going on in that boardroom, despite the guidelines, and that bedroom, which is the CEO and the chairman of that family? Same kind of interesting scenario. Very subtle. All right. Best practice number 3. Every board should have an audit committee. every board should have an audit committee. My mind. And every audit committee should have at least one non-executive director. If you haven't figured it out yet, you should be figuring it out by now, that all of these best practices are designed to maintain control over the process and make sure to the greatest extent possible that there is no hanky-pankying going on. And sometimes, despite all this, people still manage to do a little hanky-pankying, which means that folks at the board level and the committee level must be engaging in some interesting things that supersede the rules and the guidelines, and because of the herd mentality, get people to agree. Somehow, some way. But that's that closed door thing that always create challenges despite the rules. All right. So those 3 best practices, there are more, and we shall see them in the suite by and by in more detail. But those are a couple of things for you to keep in mind as you start this governance session. Because those are things that you can put into your repertoire to put to work in your day-to-day, wherever you are in the firm. Okay, to make sure that at least you are beginning to understand better what's going on in your firm. And if you see stuff that's going on that you feel a bad governance issue, that you find your compliance officer, you find your MLRO, you find the appropriate person to discuss it with. Okay? Remember, we've been talking about governance at the board level because they have the primary responsibility and the legal requirements to do it. But we all, throughout the organization, have a similar responsibility in terms of governance, to govern ourselves accordingly, which is the great big benefit of doing a session like this, so you get a feel for not only what your board is expected to do, but for the kinds of things that you should be feeling as you work at any level in your organization, no matter what type of organization it is. Okay? For example, because regulators regulate, that doesn't mean that they always practice good governance within their organizations. Some regulators in and around the world are practicing bad governance, doing some things they shouldn't be doing. Not only firms are guilty of bad governance, so are some regulators. So are some auditors. Imagine that. So this thing is very real, very practical, and something to give our attention to at all levels in the firm, no matter where we are, whether we are teller, customer service rep, middle management, senior management, CEO, all the way up to the board level, compliance, auditors for the firm, etc. This thing encapsulates everyone, every day. And it's just no reason to think it's going to change anytime soon. Because with all the regulations in place and all the auditors, folks are still looking for a way to get away with something all the time. Okay? As many rules that we have in place for money laundering and terrorist financing and credit and fraud, etc. Man, these guys would not quit. Those persons who are, and they just keep on keeping on, looking for new and incredible ways to get around the system. Same thing applies for governance. People are still every day looking for ways around the governance system. Imagine that. Okay. All right. So having said that, if you look at in your notes, you should have something that says corporate governance definition, scope, and benefits. Do you have that? Did Miguel send that to you? No? Anybody?
No, I don't see that one.
No.
Oh, okay. So when I get your email addresses confirmed, I'll send it to you. It's pretty much talking about the stuff we just talked about today. It's 2 pages of the same information telling you about what corporate governance is all about, that the board is responsible for ensuring that the governance process is carried out. It is the responsibility of the board for making sure that the governance issues are met at all costs. Okay? It also reminds us, as you will see, that this governance issue is an interactive one between all the stakeholders. Some of the key stakeholders, we've already talked about them: shareholders, board members, company management. They're just some of the key shareholders. There are many others: creditors, employees, government, regulators. The list goes on and on. Okay? So really, the effective performance of the firm is directly related to how boards carry out their governance responsibility. Okay? That's what the whole process, definition, and scope of governance is all about. Okay? The owners are the shareholders. They want to see their firms being run well. The employees want to see the company they work for being run well. The regulators want to see the company that's in their jurisdiction being run well. So everybody has a stake in this scope and definition and requirements of governance. Okay? Make no mistake about it. Okay? So I will send you this so you can add this to your repertoire of information. It's pretty much those things that you just made note of in our earlier discussions. Okay? All right, I hope you were taking notes on those, because some of those questions I am very likely to ask, like the best practices questions and the role of the board, etc. They are just absolutely key to the process. Again, we made reference as a best practice that the board should always be looking at strategic decisions for the firm. Please bear in mind that the word strategic has to do with long-term decisions. So boards are not just looking at their noses, they're looking at the firm 5, 10, 20 years down the road, and their job is to make sure that any strategic plans they make incorporates governance behavior that will sustain the firm and not hurt it. That's the whole point. Okay? Sustaining the firm for the long term. Okay? I'll give you an example. There was a company called Enron. Anybody ever heard about Enron?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Enron.
Yes,
Enron, yeah.
they use the company ESOP plan.
Oh, you remember some details too? Yes. Was that
Became
good?
very famous, set
Yes.
precedent.
Yes. For those of you who have never heard about the Enron case, please, when you get a moment, I will not assign it for homework because we're all professionals. Go and have a look at it. You don't have to read the whole thing, just read enough to let you know what bad, or to remind you of what bad governance is. But in a nutshell, Enron was a multi-billion-dollar American company made up of all kinds of business functions everywhere in the world. They were felt to be too big to fail. Enron decided, though, that they would start cooking their books so that their shareholders could be deceived, so that government and regulators could think that the company is doing better, and it's really, especially shareholders, that it's really was really doing. They start changing numbers in the financial records. How the hell they got the head of finances, the vice president of finance, to agree with them? Clearly, they didn't have that meeting in a room with an NED. If they had it in a room with an NED, that NED was either suckered into agreement or overridden. And if they were overridden, they didn't report it. etc., etc. The point is, they were able to get key people, especially in finance, see, and accounting, to change numbers in the flicking general ledger by gazillions of dollars so that the financial statements of the firm can read to be better than it actually was. Not only that, they were dipping into pension funds and other funds that they shouldn't have been dipping in to do other business of the firm, which put the pensions of the employees in jeopardy. When it was discovered what Enron was doing, it was too late. They even discovered that the Arthur Anderson, an audit firm of 80-something years, was found to be complicit with the members of the board at Enron, where they should have reported certain findings that they discovered. They did not report it. Somehow somebody got to them, the bloody auditors, to not report certain findings. And as a result, long story short, Enron, multi-billion-dollar, too big to fail company, collapsed. It didn't just collapse in part. In other words, it didn't go to Chapter 11 or the other bankruptcy chapter and then came back from it after restructuring. It collapsed and died, never to return again. Persons who are working for Enron for 30 and 40 years, all of their pensions were lost forever. Some people even committed suicide because they lost their entire life savings that was in the company. And now they were 50 and 60 and 70 with no money, not some, not 50 cents to the dollar back, none. Imagine that. If that is not a classic case of poor governance, then nothing is. And so take a moment to read a little bit of that story about Enron. Enron is not the only company that's done that. Many other companies have done it in the past, and many of them are still doing it today. So no matter how we try, it's like crime in a country. We keep fighting crime, but it doesn't quit. We just keep fighting it. New recruits, new methods, and every time we come up with something new, something extra, something more, the criminals come up with something of their own. They keep fighting. It's a never-ending battle. So let me just say for the record, this issue of governance is a never-ending battle. It rages on, and it will continue to rage on forever and ever. And those of us who have responsibility for protecting it, just like the police, we have to do everything we can. Because those persons who are practicing bad governance, they are not quitting. They are not quitting anytime soon. The drive for money and influence and more money and more money keeps them going on and on and on. Okay, something for you guys in compliance, in governance, in MLROs, in any of these areas, and even as what we call regular employees, because nowadays there's no such thing as a regular employee anymore. Just remember, whatever your position is in that firm, you have responsibility for two things. One, good governance practices. And when you don't see it, report it. The other thing, reporting suspicious transactions in your firm, because that is a legal requirement. It is no longer an option. If you have a suspicion, by law, you must report it to your MLRO. If you work for a company that doesn't have an MLRO, you should report it to someone else. But it is a requirement, especially if you work in financial services. Okay? So this huge job that we have doesn't seem as if it's going away anytime soon. And like any other type of crime, money laundering, terrorist financing, frauds, all these things, they look like they're going to be fraudulent boards, crooked audit firms. I don't even like to go there. I don't even like to refer to any audit firm as involved in stinks. That should never happen. I'm hoping that that part of the governance process where it's negative can be kept to a minimum and always cleaned up as quickly as possible when discovered, because we all rely on that final wall of defense. Okay, for sure. All right. Now, when I send you this document, again, now I send you two documents. So if I don't get your case study to you and this corporate governance definition, scope, and benefits, please drop by Monday. Send me an email and say, excuse me, the two documents. And then if you haven't gotten it, I shall certainly send it. Okay? All right. And you will see when you get this particular document, some of the great benefits of corporate governance. We looked at some of the best practices. You'll see some of the benefits. And there are many, as there should be, because whenever governance fails, so many things fail, no matter what the entity is, whether the entity is a financial institution, a retail business, any type of business of any kind, profitable or non-profit. If governance fails, everything fails. If it's a church as an entity, that fails. If it's a charity as an entity, that fails. If it's a non-profit as an entity of any kind, that fails. If it's the home, which is an entity, of course, that everything fails when governance fails. Okay, whether you realize it or not, homes in the Bahamas and around the world are failing because of poor governance. Same principles, Okay, by all means. And so this thing is prevalent everywhere. We in this class are thinking primarily financial services, but bear in mind, countries, same thing. Where countries practice poor governance, countries fail. And I'm sure many of you are aware of that happening at this very moment. Poor governance. My. So you'll see that governance has some great benefits for those of us who are brave enough to practice. And really, that's where all of us are required to be brave enough. Just that there's some of us, as always, who will seek to be violators, as it has always been, interestingly enough. So what are some of the benefits of good corporate governance? Well, first of all, and you'll see it when you get the printout, it provides for corporate success and what we call economic growth. In other words, when you're doing things right, things tend to work better. Companies grow better, they are more successful. When you practice bad governance, companies come under heat, they get fined, they lose their license, all kinds of crazy things happen. They lose staff, they lose good board members, they lose great NEDs. It gets messy. But if you're doing the good thing, success comes even more, and economic growth and development of the company is far more successful and certainly more comfortable. Good governance maintains the confidence of investors. So if you're a company that needs investors and you're practicing bad governance, they're not going to put their money in your company. If you run an ASU and word gets out that you practice bad governance, like you thieving people ASU money, then people are not going to come in your ASU. Same principle. Okay, so if you want investor confidence to be maintained in your company, make sure the word doesn't go out that you're practicing poor governance, because investors are not keen to put their money into areas where governance is poor. That means they're putting their money at risk. Okay, that's the financial side of the problem. And of course, if you can't get money from investors, then you may not be able to raise the money that you need to grow your company. Of course, if investors get word that you're practicing bad governance, then your bankers may get word too. So when you go to borrow, they decline your application. because they have information that you're practicing bad governance from one source or the other. Wow. Similarly, if you're practicing bad governance, but you're still able to borrow somewhere, they're going to charge you a higher rate of interest. So the cost of bad governance is higher. When your reputation is good, you pay less, your cost of borrowing is lower. Interestingly enough, if you have a bad reputation or negative one, they might lend you money, but you're going to have to pay 3 and 4 times the amount in interest to get it, which of course increase your overall cost of doing business, which ultimately reduces your profits because you have to pay higher interest, which reduces your profit margins and the success of the company overall, and the dividend payouts that you make, and the share prices because of this heavy cost of debt. So you see, all of a sudden, governance is interwoven in the accounting and the financial and the profitability and the cash flows of the company. Just like that, it is all interconnected. And there are some people who at the board level who are practicing governance issues have no idea of the financial implications of the governance process. They're just sitting on the board, collecting a board fee, enjoying the caviar and wine, flying off some, to Waikiki or something, to whatever, and so on. A lot of them are really not keen on a lot of the things that really, especially from the financial side, go on with the board responsibilities. In part because they don't have the background to do it, in another part because they don't really have the interest. Okay. But again, these are all benefits. Share prices tend to remain stable and climb when good practices. Why? Because of the confidence in the company. It's as simple as that. Same as your ASU. If you have a good reputation for protecting people's money when they have an ASU, people will join your ASU. If you don't, they will not. Not only will they not join, they will tell other people that you're a TIFA in Bahamianese. And then suddenly, your little ASU business fails, just like any other business will fail. Okay? So if you're doing good governance, then your share prices are reflected in that, and share prices tend to go up. When share prices go up, investors are happy. When investors are happy, they're prepared to put more money in your company if you need it to grow or to do other projects for your company. See, the whole thing is interconnected. And that's the whole idea of this course, in part, to show you not only that good governance is crucial, but of the interconnectivity of governance practices and the accounting and financial implications of good governance. Okay? It does not exist in a vacuum. Okay? And if you can just make that connection alone, when you go out into the world of work again, you should have a slightly different perspective, maybe even beginning today already. And if you do, then you're well on your way. Because this, as far as I'm concerned, is designed to give you that perspective. So you don't just have tunnel vision when you go out to do whatever you're doing. Okay? Benefits. Okay? Just how we have stinky things going on with bad governance, these are the benefits of good governance. And any company, entity, program, whatever it might be, the practice can expect to benefit from these things. Okay? For sure. Good governance will minimize waste. Watch this. Good governance will minimize waste and corruption and risk and mismanagement. How about that? Man, there are a whole lot of benefits from doing things right. That's my whole point here. That's the whole point of good corporate governance. The only reason why we end up with corruption and waste and risk and mismanagement, because every now and then, all too often, somebody or a little gang decide they want to get their share of the money from somewhere. Or if they're a money launderer, they want to clean up the money. And so they pay off one of the frontliners who are responsible for protecting the organization so that they can move the money along and clean it up. So see, all of a sudden, it's connected even to money laundering, trafficking and all this weapons running. The whole thing is interconnected. Money launderers and terrorist financing people, etc., they have a hell of a time getting into a firm that is practicing good governance. But those that are not, it's easy to bribe someone, pay them off, give them a new car, a ride in the jet to Waikiki in the south of France, so that they can break through the wall. Point is, these good governance practices are just to show you that if we practice them, the company will have a far greater success, make it very difficult to break investor confidence, and even more difficult for persons who are involved in illegal and fraudulent and corruption activities to break through the barriers of that firm. My. So the company then, at the end of the day, ends up with this great big reputation, if it's practicing good governance, that hey, and you just, I don't know how many of you are aware of certain Bible verses, but the Bible has a verse in it that says, we are known by the fruit. The same thing happens with good governance. If you're practicing good governance in your firm, you will be known by the fruit, for sure. And if you're practicing bad governance, you will also be known by the fruit. Okay? This is why some persons who are involved in illegal activity, they don't go to certain firms by accident. They do a little research to see what the perspective is, what the reputation is that you have with regards to governance. And if you have a reputation for bad governance in any form or other, they will target you and they will come bearing fruits to see if they can get you, based on your reputation, to do the wrong thing. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the world of good corporate governance. Now, in our discussions, we won't always use the word good, but whenever we say good, whenever we say corporate governance, for our purposes, we are implying good. But we're also implying that some are not good. Okay? So always keep that in mind as you think about this issue of governance. So you're gonna be inundated for the next couple of weeks with this issue of corporate governance and its requirements, but that's okay. It's intended to inundate you because that's the whole idea. It's like brushing your teeth. I don't know if any of you have children. Remember, we tell our children as soon as they get teeth, we tell them every day. Mary, John, did you brush your teeth? Ah, I forgot. So they're 1, then they turn 5 every day. Go brush your teeth. 10 every day. Go brush your teeth. 15 every day. Go brush your teeth. And sometimes they're 20 years old. Did you brush your teeth, John? Ah, Mom, I'm 28. God. Then say it like that. So we inundate them with it for a reason. And so this semester, for the next couple of weeks, you will be inundated with this word called corporate governance. If you start feeling sick and tired of it, that's okay. That means it's working. That's the intention. Okay? Such that when we're done with our discussion of corporate governance, oh, thank God. But that's okay. By then, all the rules and requirements and stuff and whatever I say will be in your soul. And that's the whole idea. Okay? All right. So having said that, I just want to take the next few minutes to begin our discussion on the guiding principles before we end for today, and then we will pick it up next week. All right, so please pull out your notes on guiding principles of corporate governance. And we're going to have a little introductory discourse with that, and then we will break for today. You guys have been fantastic. All right. Everybody have the guiding principles of corporate governance? You see that? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, lovely. So now I need someone to read. I have talked enough for one day. all bloody day so far. So now I need somebody to read. So I could kick back while you entertain us and your colleagues with this important information. Do I have a volunteer or should I pick somebody randomly?
I can read.
Okay, who said that?
Chia.
Okay, Gia, way to go. All right, Gia, guiding principles of corporate governance. Let it rip. The board approves.
Hold on 1 second. What page?
Oh, that's the beginning. The topic is guiding principles of corporate governance. It should be in your notes.
I know it's page.
Which booklet? I know
Oh, you got
there were like
That's the
copies of the booklet.
That's the OECD principle of government, corporate governance.
Corporate governance.
Not the OECD one yet, the other one.
Oh,
The topic says guiding principles.
Okay. See which one that is.
I don't see that one.
nope.
You guys don't have the guiding principles?
No,
No,
I hadn't.
What the hell?
I see the central bank
I got
guidelines,
Central Bank,
OECD one.
OECD, yeah, AML, yeah,
Oh,
but no.
yeah, that's for next week. That's
No.
next week's goodies. Okay, let me share the screen then. That means I have 3 documents to send you, correct?
That's correct.
What is the first one?
The first one is the
It's the
Central
case
Bank.
study.
The case study. Okay, case
Oh.
study.
Oh,
Just want to
that's
see if you guys are listening. What's the next one I have to send you?
The guiding principles, and then the definitions.
Yeah, the definition and scope. The definition and scope, okay. And then the guiding principles. All right. So I have 3 to send you this weekend to go along with what you have. All right, let me share the screen, see if this works. Come on, guiding principles. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, Gia.
Yes.
There you go. Let it rip.
All right, guiding principles of corporate governance. Number 1, the board approves corporate strategies that are intended to build sustainable long-term value. Selects a chief executive officer, CEO, oversees the CEO and senior management in operating the company's business, including allocating capital for long-term growth and assessing and managing risks, and set the tone at the top for ethical conduct.
Let me say this before Gia goes on. First of all, when we're having these reading sessions, if somebody sees something that they don't understand, it's not clear, interrupt if you want and say, well, excuse me, what do you mean by ethical conduct? Or whatever the case might be, so you get out of your skin right away. Or you can wait until you feel it's an appropriate time. Either way would be fine. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Notice what she said at the end of that paragraph. The board is responsible for setting the tone. Anybody, what does setting the tone mean?
Being an example.
Yes, of doing what? The right thing. Practicing proper corporate governance. Now, let me give you an example. The home is an entity. In fact, the home is the most important entity in the world, by the way, in case we're still not sure about that. We keep saying like we don't get that yet. The home is the most important entity in the world, anywhere in the world. Now, who makes up the board in the home? Anyone? Which 2 people? Who are the board members in the home?
Husband, wife, and God.
Yeah, husband, wife, and God. Thank you very much. And who's the chairman of that board?
God.
God.
The wife is. Sometimes that is the unfortunate truth. But really, in that entity called the home, yeah, the board is made up of at least those of us who believe in God. which is what we're supposed to be believing in this jurisdiction. God is the chairman, and the husband and wife are the CEO and board members, etc. Okay. So they then, as a unit, sets the tone for the family so that whatever they do, primarily the father and the mother, the children are watching them. True or false?
True.
True. And children are watching them like regulators are watching, like shareholders are watching, like government is watching, like employees especially are watching. They're like the children in the home watching the mother and father and seeing what the hell they're doing. And so children practice what they see their parents do, right or wrong.
Right.
And so it is important then for parents to set the tone at the top so that children will practice doing the right thing. Same thing in the firm. The board is expected to set the tone at the top so that the employees and others who are looking at that firm will see their practices being that of good governance and ethical conduct. That's what she means by setting the tone at the top and practicing ethical conduct. Very serious responsibility. Now, regulators and auditors and all that stuff are just there to police it. But really, if we're smart, we shouldn't need any policing. But not everybody's smart. Only some of us at the board level are smart and doing what is required. There's always a little gang somewhere who are looking to get away with something. Past and present and future. They're not going to go anywhere anytime soon. All right, keep on going, Gia.
Okay, number 2. Management develops and implements corporate strategy and operates the company's business under the board's oversight with the goal of producing sustainable long-term value creation. Number 3, management, under the oversight of the board and its audit committee, produces financial statements that fairly present the company's financial condition and results of operations and makes the timely disclosures investors need to assess the financial and business soundness and risk of the company.
Which is why we have this other side to this course, which is why I implemented this other side to this course. Because a lot of times people don't talk about what a financial statement looks like, what it's intended to do, how important it is to the governance process. But as you can see here, it is fundamentally critical. And for the most part, when external auditors in particular come into a firm, their primary function is to check the veracity of financial statements, because oftentimes firms have internal auditors who are checking operational issues or compliance or both. So when that auditor comes in, if they see something operationally that is out of whack, they will mention it. But their primary objective is to check the financial reporting to make sure that the tens, hundreds, thousands, millions, and gazillions of dollars, depending on the size of the firm, are being recorded and reported correctly. And there is no hanky-pankying going on with the firm's resources, because money has a way of doing things to some people. And persons at the board level who have access and authority, they oftentimes get away with murder because of their influence and their access to the resources, more so than anybody else, which make them board members and senior management a dangerous adversary when they decide to do the wrong thing and practice poor governance. Okay, Gia, keep going. You started it.
Okay, number 4. The audit committee of the board retains and manages the relationship with the outside auditor oversees the company's annual financial statement audit and internal controls over financial reporting, and oversees the company's risk management and compliance programs.
Sorry, Gia, but the problem is every point that you made so far is loaded. I don't want you guys as corporate governance people, compliance people, regulators or otherwise to ignore any one of these 4 points so far. Every last one of them is loaded with very serious information that is important to know, especially at the board level, but not only at the board level, okay? See that outside auditor communicating with the audit committee? Who knows why we require an audit committee? If the board, why doesn't the whole board just get involved one time? Why is it that the board is required to establish an audit committee? Anyone?
Separation of duties.
Yes, separation. And separation of duties creates a little more what we hope is something called independence. Anybody ever heard that word? That's why we are required to establish the audit committee as an extension from the general board, and to ensure that the audit committee has an NED who can also object if anything contrary happens and somebody on the audit committee decides to play crazy like they didn't see it or they don't want to report it. This is very deep stuff. And the textbook version, which is what we're looking at now, is only the tip of the iceberg compared to what may actually happen in practice when Homo sapiens get together in a room and start doing stuff. Who are Homo sapiens, anyone?
Human beings.
Yeah, that's us. We do all kinds of funny stuff, okay? All right, it's like, for example, if you marry and you say to your spouse, now when I die, here's what I'd like you to do with my assets, with this, with that, the other thing. And they say, sure, you know, I'll do whatever you say. And then what happens when you die all too often? Anyone? What happens?
Goes out the window, they do what they feel like doing.
And the same thing happens at the board level, at the audit committee level, at any other committee level, and at any other blah, blah, blah. We know what we should do. We know what we promise to do. But when the thing hits the fan, some people do all kinds of weird stuff. That's really the point. Okay? Keep on going, Gia. Final point.
The nominating, no, we're on number 5, eh?
I know. I just final point because after this point, we'll break for the day.
Okay. The nominating or corporate governance committee of the board plays a leadership role in shaping the corporate governance of the company, strives to build and engage a diverse board whose composition is appropriate in light of the company's needs and strategy, and actively conducts succession planning for the board.
Thank you very much, Gia. Put an X to that point because next week you will pick it up until you've done your part, and we'll find one of your other colleagues to assist you, okay? But before we break, let me say this. Anybody knows who the nominating committee is on a board? From experience or otherwise? Or based on this information?
Would they be the people that the board selected?
Shareholders.
Well, could be shareholders. Yeah, could be persons that are selected for the board by the nominating committee. In other words, the nominating committee is made up of certain board members whose job it is to determine what additional board members will join the board, what board members will be asked to resign, what recommendations on which board members to fire, which NEDs to bring on, which NEDs to fire, and so on. So that is a huge job that requires a whole lot of independence. And this is why we have a nominating committee of the board with a view to try to create an independent group of board members who we feel hopefully will not be influenced by other board members and other people in terms of selecting board members, firing board members, recommending the resignation of NEDs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Big time job, okay? And of course, the issue of succession comes into play because new board members coming in and old ones going out, et cetera, is what keeps the board a continuous process. And the nominating committee has an important role, just like the compensation committee that we'll see later on or next week has in maintaining the continuance of the board, the continuance of the NED to provide independence to the board, the continuance of board members who will hopefully be selected because of their ability and their integrity. See, that's the other thing. If you know somebody's a known criminal, even though they've never been to prison, should they be appointed to your board?
No.
No. But we have some known criminals in the Bahamas and around the world who are sitting on boards. They just haven't been, well, it's not in the textbook, but it's in real life. The point is, the nominating committee has the responsibility. If somebody says, let's select Mary or John, and then the other committee member says, but based on this information, they are known to lack integrity, they've been involved in shady business, they're connected to X, Y, and Z, then that nominating committee needs to sit down and say, wait a minute, including the NED, and say, you know what? This is not a good idea. And so even though this might be the chairman's friend, see, the chairman wants us to bring him on. We, as the nominating bloody committee, and we have been nominated as a committee for our independence, will not do it because it creates too much risk for this firm. Then somebody will say, but you can get the chairman dead, man, you don't want to. Well, too bad, says the NED. And then somebody in the nominating committee might say, well, Mr. NED, expect your time to be shorter than you thought. Anyway, so we have the textbook requirement, the guideline requirements, all these requirements that we must meet, but bear in mind that the reason why we still have issues is because people are always seeking to violate it. And so the persons responsible for regulation and auditing and compliance and all that stuff, their jobs, our jobs, is to seek to minimize the amount of violations and to bring to the fore those who are in fact responsible. Okay. All right. So we're going to stop there today. So folks, when I send you this information, go ahead and read it up along with the central bank guidelines that we're going to pick up next week, because when we come next week, we'll finish up the guiding principles and we go right into the central bank requirements next week. So please feel free to read ahead so that you can have a jump on the information. Do not worry if you do not understand everything. That is not the purpose at this point. If you're reading something and you have a question, please get out a piece of paper and write down your questions so that you can raise them next week. If you have a question while you're doing your reading and it's incongruent with something in your firm or in some other firm or some other environment that you would like to raise a question on, just for clarification, you do not have to call the name of any entity if you do not wish to do so, but you should raise the question to get clarification. Okay? Did everybody get that?
Yes.
Fantastic. You guys have been more than great today. Please have a great week, and I'll see you next week, Saturday at 12:30. If you have any questions that you may want to raise about anything before that time, you have my contacts. Please feel free to drop me a note, and I usually respond within 24 hours. Okay? If for some reason I don't respond in 24 hours, do not be bashful. I do not mind if you remind me and say, hey, hello, the matter, the question. I am not thin-skinned, let it rip so we can get done what we need to get done. Okay? Any other questions before we break? None? All right, have a safe and fantastic week Enjoy your holiday on Monday, and I shall see you guys next week, Saturday. Take care.
You too, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.